Alright guys, so we're going to start talking about how to do some programming using the math operators that we talked about in the notes. So if you go to the math operators page on our class website, right here, math operators programs will load up and give you some ideas about some programs that you need to write. So we're going to go over number 1 together, and then I'm expecting you guys to do at least 2 more. Okay, so there's some kind of interesting problems in there, and let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to do sum and average. We're going to write a program that asks the user to enter 4 3-digit numbers that will be stored in 4 variables. The program should sum those variables and store the sum in a 5th variable, then compute the average and store the answer in the 6th variable. Then we're just going to print out those results. Okay, so I'm suggesting that you use these values, and we should get these results, right? So the sum of the 4 numbers is, and the average of the 4 numbers is. Okay, so I'm trying to show you the user input in this blue bolded text. Okay, so let's go over to BlueJ, and we're going to make a new class called Math Operators. So here we are in our Intro to Programming project. We're going to make a new class called Math Operators. Okay, and then if we go ahead and open up that, mine looks a little different from yours, so let me just kind of get rid of all this stuff and get rid of that stuff. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make a new method and just call it sum and average. So I'm just getting that name just to kind of review from the name of the problem. So number 1 is sum and average. Okay, we're going to be asking the user to input some information for us, or input some data for us. So that means that we need a scanner. And if we're going to use a scanner, that means we have to import scanner. So up above the class name, we're going to go import java.util.scanner. And then we're going to remember that anytime that we open a scanner, we got to remember that we're going to close that scanner once we're done. Okay, so now we're set up to get some input using the scanner object called console. So the way that the prompts are supposed to go for this program is we're supposed to tell the user to enter the first number. So I'm going to do system.out.print, quote, enter the first number. And then I'm going to go ahead and get an integer value. I'm just going to call it first, and I want it to be equal to console.next int. Okay. So usually I tell you guys, like, do a little bit of programming, check that it works, right? So let's go ahead and just make sure that that's working for us. So I'm going to go back to the project window and compile, and then I'm going to run sum and average, and it says enter the first number. So if I do 567 or whatever, it looks like it's actually entering that number. So I feel pretty good about that. So I'm going to go back to this, and now I'm going to copy and paste that 3 more times, right? Because I want the second number, third number, and the 4th number. So then I just have to go back and change these prompts and the variable names. So enter the second number. That's going to go in a variable called second. Enter the third number, third. Okay. And then I'm not going to run that. I feel pretty good about what that's going to do. All right. So the instructions for the program tell me that once I've entered those 4 variables, that the program should sum them and store the sum in a 5th variable. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new variable called sum, so int sum, and that's going to equal the sum of those 4 variables. Okay, so I'm just going to go first plus second plus third plus fourth. All right. And if I want to output that, then I can just go ahead and put system.out.println, println, and I'm just going to see what this says. It says the sum of the 4 numbers is, okay, so quote, the sum of the 4 numbers is, okay. And I'm going to do this a little bit differently. So I'm going to take off this ln right here. We're going to do it like we talked about it yesterday. But what I do want you to pay attention to is that I've put a space after the s and is. So whatever I print out next is going to have a space after the is. Okay? So I'm changing this to system.out.print. And then I'm going to do another system.out.print. In this time, I'm just going to print out the sum variable. And then I'm going to do an empty line. Now again, you could do this in one line. Okay? So we could do that whole thing in one line. And I'm just going to show you what that would look like. So println. I'm going to copy that. Paste it in there, and then concatenate this, not the dumb variable, the sum variable. Okay, so this one line does the job of these 3 lines. All right, and you guys can start deciding on your own, like, well, I like that better, or nope, this makes more sense to me, I like that better. All right, and that's just up to you. But what we're doing again here is print out the literal, the sum of the 4 numbers is, and then concatenate the value of sum. Okay? So that's not too bad. Then the last thing that the project or the program tells you to do, the descriptor tells you to do, is also compute the average. Okay? But let's just look at that for a second. So it wants us to say the average of the 4 numbers is, what's the difference between this right here versus this right here and these? Right, exactly. This is a double, right? So it's not an integer anymore. It's going to be a double. So we're going to create a double called average. Okay. And how do I find the average? Take the sum and we divide it by 4. Okay. So that's fine. So let's go ahead and try to print that out now. So I'm going to just copy these 3 lines of code. If you'd rather just copy this line of code, you can do that on your own. But I'm going to say now the average of the 4 numbers is average. Okay? So when I try to run that now, so what I got to do is I got to look at what I'm supposed to be entering here, but let's go ahead and run it. Sum and average. So it tells me that the first number is 475. The next number is 821. The next number is 369. And then what, 562? Yeah. Okay, so I get this sum of the numbers is 2,227. Then it tells me that the average is 556.0. So what's the problem there? It doesn't tell me that it's 0.75. Okay? So here's a little bit of a hint for you guys. Remember from the operations that we talked about yesterday, If my two values here are integers, the result of this division is going to be an integer. Okay? And so if I store an integer into a double, it's just going to tack on the 0.0 that we saw when we just printed that out. If I want this to be a double, then what I want to do is I want to make one of these values into a double. So there is a way to make this into a double, okay? But it's probably easier for us right now to just say, make that 4.0. And when I divide by 4.0 instead of just 4, it's going to give me my double result, my decimal result, okay? So let's go ahead and run it again. I forgot the numbers, so 475,821. $369,562. And you guys see now that when we run this, we get the sum of the four numbers is this. The average of the four numbers is this with the 0.75. So that 0.75 again came from changing the 4 that we divided by to be 4.0. Okay, that gives us that decimal answer. All right.